have Timothy Staples with us, who is going to lead us through a discussion of some of the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks. And if you were paying attention during the little tiny video that we just showed, he actually created a trailer that was put up on the website to let people know that this discussion was going to take place tonight. So this is a man who is pretty passionate as well as knowledgeable about Gwendolyn Brooks and her work. So let me introduce to you Timothy Staples, who's the Assistant Director for Training and Leadership Development in AU's Housing and Dining Programs. In this role, he provides guidance and direction for professional staff and for student staff, as well as leadership development and program initiatives. During his time at AU, he created the Leadership Academy, which is a living and learning community for first-year students where they live together in community. Prior to coming to AU, which he did in 2012, he was the Assistant Director of Residence Life for Diversity and Student Development at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And in this role, he led diversity initiatives for all 7,000 students living on campus and for 60 staff members in the Office of Residence Life. He's held adjunct faculty roles in education at Miami University, at the University of St. Francis in Illinois, and at DePaul University. Prior to his work in higher education, he was a middle and high school administrator, serving as Dean of Students and then an assistant principal. Mr. Staples holds a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in Black Studies from Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville, a Master of Arts in Educational Leadership from Aurora University, and he's currently a doctoral candidate in Leadership in Administration at Aurora University. His dissertation research is on the experience of African American student leaders at historically and predominantly white colleges and universities. Tim Staples, would you come?
And learning is so valuable that it is therefore sacred. And a life filled with learning is the greatest gift of all. There are songs to be sung that honor the beauty of such a life, reminding us all of our purpose and our potential. Good evening to you all. And thank you so much for being here. And I thank definitely my librarian, my university librarian, Nancy Davenport, and her staff for bringing us together as a community of learners to discuss not just this piece of work, but many other literary and poetic pieces that shaped our country. So I'm going to attempt to get the PowerPoint back up here. Okay. I have a clicker. So this will be a discussion, but also I will start off by talking about some things I had to really write a few things down to get some things started. As the students used to say at Miami, they used to worry about my professor grants that I would go on, and so I make sure that in a lot of things I'll write down. I'm glad to be here, and yes, I'm nervous. I told her I was nervous. It's different. You go speak at other universities, it's like, okay, hey, you don't have to invite me back if you don't want to. You know, I don't have to see you on the quad or in the community in the same way. But here is like, you know, I'll either be glad and happy or I'll be, how you doing? You know, so that's one thing that I want to. Truly, I believe that learning is valuable, and before I go forward, I just would like to pay honor to the Professor Emeritus at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, Eugene Redmond. I took classes with him on literature of the Third World and African American literature, and it is amazing, and I do that to encourage the teachers in the audience and the mentors. You know, you plant seeds and you never know where it goes. And so all the time I'm sitting in his class and we're talking. He's the poet laureate of East St. Louis, and he did a lot of work with Henry Dumas, really working with that. And one day he gave me a lot of books, including some of Henry Dumas' books, and I was so excited. And he talked about it at a lecture that he did in a huge rotunda. He said in all of his time he had not met someone who reacted that way to getting free books. But I knew coming from his collection that that was just an amazing honor. So today we will discuss A Street in Bronzeville by Gwendolyn Brooks. This opportunity is somewhat sentimental. When I signed up to be a part of the series, there was a little bit of a struggle. I kept sending things back, I'll do this one, and I got the email back and said, that's taken already. But when I saw A Street in Bronzeville, which I had not read, I saw the name Gwendolyn Brooks, and understand when I see Gwendolyn Brooks, the picture that is there, that's what I see in my mind when I hear the name Gwendolyn Brooks. It's that stern picture that I've seen in books and in teachers' blackboards and different things like that. Because you see, I'm from East St. Louis, Illinois. So this is my poet laureate of Illinois, and even in her death. The schools there are significant, and this is why she stuck out in my mind. In East St. Louis, all of the schools are named after presidents. Or Martin Luther King, which is one school. I went to Warren G. Harding Elementary School, and I had to learn about Warren G. Harding. I went to the Martin Luther King Junior High School, a school that was unnamed but featured in Savage Inequalities, and I went to East St. Louis Lincoln Senior High School. So when I graduated and moved to the Chicago area to work at the Illinois American Science Academy, and that is in Aurora, I was in Naperville and looking in Oak Park, very affluent areas, and I see these schools named after Gwendolyn Brooks. And that impressed me. That was very significant. So since then, when I hear Gwendolyn Brooks, I get very, very excited. So let's talk about her. As a history person, I have to go back. I want to give some context. That's why I said you don't have to cram. We're going to talk a little bit about her. Sometime in one interview, she said sometimes she wanted to introduce herself as Gwendolyn Pulitzer Brooks, to talk about the Pulitzers that she actually won. But the year 1917 is very significant to our talk today. You see, Gwendolyn Brooks was born in Topeka, Kansas in that year, and the Pulitzer Prize was established in that year. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Chicago, Illinois, the place she would call home until her death. She published her first poem, Eventide, in 1930 in the American Childhood magazine at the age of 13. Eventide, when the sun sinks beyond the mountains and the sky is besprinkled with color and the neighboring brook is peacefully still with a gentle, silent ripple now and then, when flowers send forth sweet odors and the grass is uncommonly green, when the air is tranquilly sweet and children flock to their mother's sides, then worry flees and comfort resides, for all know welcoming evening. Her mother, as many say, encouraged her or prompted her to send her writings to Langston Hughes and James Weldon Johnson. Now, I like to change prompted to, I'm sure her mother told her, you are going to do this, you see, because I truly believe working with students that the whole idea of parents suggesting something and students negotiating in their mind whether or not they're going to do it is a relatively new phenomenon in our society. So I believe she was told to do it. And in the interview when she was at the Library of Congress, she talked about that moment of where she both met James Weldon Johnson and the moment where she met Langston Hughes, and the James Weldon Johnson did not go so well as her mother marched her up to him and said, this is Gwendolyn Brooks, and she is the one that have been writing to you. And according to Ms. Brooks, he said, so many people write to me. And so, as she recognized, although true, it still, as the kids tell me, left her feeling some kind of way. But the meeting was very different for her and Langston Hughes, who she met at an event at her church. Church, I repeat church, because it becomes very significant in the talk as we go through and we talk about some of the poetry. The church is very significant in writings and in Bronzeville at that time and even now. So during that time, her mother learned a valuable lesson, according to Brooks, that she made sure she was equipped this time. So she wasn't just going to go meet her and say, this is Gwendolyn Brooks, and she has been writing to you. She equipped her with manuscripts. So he read them there, and she stated that his reply was, you're talented, you will write a book someday. But in this time, she really was reading a lot of the writers during that time. So, one of James Weldon Johnson, who's also the author of the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, he did a more sociological study about what he called, and he wrote, the Black Manhattan. And he talked all the way from crossing over the river to what we know as Harlem, that he was termed the Black Manhattan. And he says, New York's Black Bohemia constituted a part of the famous Old Tenderloin, and naturally it nourished a number of ever-present vices, chief among them gambling and prostitution. But it nourished other things, and on these things were the artistic interests. The rest of the manifestations were commonplaces. The Black Bohemia had its physical being in a number of clubs, a dozen or more of them well established and well known. So also, to influence her, Langston Hughes was writing, and his went more from that overarching sociological study to identifying characters, like his 1927 Ruby Brown. She was young and beautiful and golden like the sunshine that warmed her body, and because she was colored, Mayville had no place to offer her, nor fuel for the clean flame of joy that tried to bomb without her soul. One day, sitting on old Miss Latham's back porch polishing the silver, she asked herself two questions, and they ran something like this. What can a colored girl do? On the money from a white woman's kitchen, and ain't there any joy in this town? Now the streets down by the river know more about pretty Ruby Brown. The communication that she was able to have with Langston Hughes and owing to her studies, she really developed in the time that we know as the New Negro Renaissance. So during this time, as we begin to paint the picture to her writings, we understand that because of the Jim Crow laws and this connected violence, racial violence in the South, African Americans continue to move to the north, the Great Migration. Some of the cities were, of course, with the largest populations, New York, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Detroit, the Washington, Baltimore area, at home we are, and Chicago. By 1934, Brooks was publishing in the Chicago Defender. Now again, leading up to this understanding of writing and also addressing some things in society, this newspaper was the nation's most influential black weekly newspaper by World War I, with more than 2/3 of its readership base located outside Chicago. The Defender did not use the word Negro or black. Instead, African Americans were referred to as the race, and black men as race men, and women as race women. The Defender was the first black newspaper to have a circulation of over 100,000, first to have a health column, and first to have a full-page comic strip. As a northern paper, the Defender had more freedoms to denounce issues outright. The editorial position was very militant, attacking racial inequities right head-on. And the newspaper was was in the South based on black Pullman porters and entertainers, taking them down, distributing them kind of in the dark, but they had to get them across the Mason-Dixie line because they were not able to distribute them just outright in the South. In fact, the Ku Klux Klan was trying to confiscate them and also threaten the readers. So to give you just a little background, that's what was going on in her early time, and she published weekly often in the Chicago Defender. So that's a little bit on the Chicago Defender. Langston Hughes really enters her life, and again, they become friends. That connection is there. Weary Blues by Langston Hughes. drawn in a drowsy syncopated tune, rocking back and forth to a mellow croon. I heard a Negro play down on Lenox Avenue the other night by the pale, dull pallor of the old gas light. He did a lazy sway, he did a lazy sway to the tune, oh those weary blues. With his ebony hands on each ivory key, he made that poor piano moan and melody, oh blues. Swaying to and fro on his rickety chair, he played that sad, raggy tune like a musical fool. Sweet blues coming from the black man's soul, oh blues. In a deep song voice with melancholy tone, I heard that Negro sing, that old piano moan. Ain't got nobody in all this world, ain't got nobody but myself. Ain't gonna quit my frowning and put my troubles on the shelf. Thump, 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 with his feet on the floor, he played a few chords, then sang some more. I got weary blues, and can't be satisfied. Got weary blues, and I can't be satisfied. I ain't happy no more, and I wish I had died. And far, far into the night, he crooned that tune. The stars went out, and so did the moon. The singer stopped playing and went to bed, while the weary blues echoed through his head. He slept like a rock or a man that's dead. This is said to be one of the works that helped Gwendolyn Pulitzer Brooks, if you please, to understand writing about ordinary aspects of black life was important. At the age of 28, she published her first book. As Langston Hughes told her, one day you will publish. She published her first book, A Street in Bronzeville, and it received instant literary acclaim. Later that year, she was one of Mademoiselle magazine's 10 Young Women of the Year. As a result of her acclaim from this book, she got the first Guggenheim Fellowship and gave her support for her next book. She became a fellow in American Academy of Arts and Letters. According to one critic, stated that the book comprises of a collage of racism, sexism, classism of America, and its illumination of the people who strive to survive in Bronzeville. Within the book, Brooks focused on the lives of African Americans living in Bronzeville in the South Side. How many have been to South Side Chicago? It's the area where the White Sox Stadium is. And okay, you got it? You with me? So Bronzeville from 1920s to the 1950s were known as the Black Belt and could be described as Chicago's epicenter of the Great Migration from the South. Also known as the Black Metropolis, it became as one author put it, Chicago's literary renaissance for black writers. B.J. Bolden places the description on a street in Bronzeville as vignettes of the places and people who strive to survive in Bronzeville by working hard, having a good time, and praising the Lord. The construction of the urban landscape in which African Americans are living, working hard, having a good time, and praising the Lord. I'm going to pause my talk and let's have Ms. Brooks bring us into our work today.
Kitchenette building. We are things of dry hours and the involuntary plan. Grayed in and gray. Dream makes a giddy sound, not strong like rent, feeding a wife, satisfying a man. But could a dream send up through onion fumes its white and violet, fight with fried potatoes and yesterday's garbage ripening in the hall, flutter, or sing an aria down these rooms? Even if we were willing to let it in, had time to warm it, keep it very clean, anticipate a message, let it begin. We wonder, but not well, not for a minute. Since number 5 is out of the bathroom now, we think of lukewarm water, hope to get in it.
kitchenette. Kitchenette building. During the 1930s and 1940s, old mansions on Chicago's South Side were turned into overpriced tiny rooms with kitchenettes. This was the base of Chicago's unofficial, yet official, residential segregation. It's very challenging. The piece challenges how can dreams exist? A question of logic, a question of reality. How can they exist in the midst of the suffocation of overpowering existence of poverty, and that connects to the involuntary plan. She talks about the involuntary plan, which is the history of slavery, which has created almost this type of social class or social caste system. I know when I was in undergrad, I said that to a teacher and it was controversial, and I still say it with some of the things. In reading it as well, some other representation is challenging the thought or expectation of social mobility. The challenge that exists still today in our social ills like racism is the removal of the context of the history that created them. Then there's the dare to hope. The dare to hope, she presents it in that poem, then is crushed by the reality. I'll hope some and I'll look at it and it turns positive. Then the reality comes in like, okay, we've thought about it, it's been in my head, now the bathroom is open, I need to go and deal with that. So some pictures of the kitchenette building, multiple families living in that building. One of the things to understand about her writing is that she's writing about people, she's writing about herself. She stayed in the kitchenette on the South Side. So the realities of breaking up a one house and the smells that came through, the rotting things within the hallway, the trash within the hallway, how can you have hope? Where is that hope? As you look at the things that are around you, and then, to deal with that reality coming in. Anybody have any thoughts, any questions about that so far? Yes?
Just wondering, who was her audience in this? She's writing, someone living the life would definitely feel it deeply. But it's hard to imagine the Pulitzer Prize material being written for less than academic circles. So I just wonder, who was she addressing works like this?
I like that you're one of those students that bring your lecture all the way up to the forefront. So, she was addressing the larger white society of that time to bring the reality of what was going on to their attention. Her use of both the European style, because she did study European authors as well as African Americans. So the mixture of the European style and the African American or black style was said to be disarming, and then that brought attention to what was going on in that area and what was happening to African Americans.
You spoke that the defender referred to blacks as race. What was your term for non-blacks?
Non-blacks, did I remember? No, the way I remember, I read some things with the defender. I remember seeing white. I do remember seeing white, but yes.
Were any other distinctions made? Today Hispanic would. I imagine it wasn't at that time.
No, because the focus of the paper was really to share what was going on with African Americans. Also, it was writing beyond Chicago. to help inform and to help also encourage, to bring a message that could not be spoken. So that's why we started to, that's not often brought in significance in her life, but if you think about it, that's really where she begins to understand the power of that, I would say, advocacy, that agency of bringing voice to, African Americans and what's going on, seeing a different narrative or presenting a different narrative in a place that only allowed one narrative.
You said that 2/3 of the readership was outside of the Chicago area.
Mhm.
How did that split between rural and urban?
It was, I'd say majority, I would say more urban in the other cities, but some rural for those who really, could read in the different areas of the South past the Mason-Dixie line. But I think as the communities built around the different urban areas, Philadelphia, Detroit, New York, etc., that's where a lot of the readership.
So the distribution really did follow the railroad,
Yes.
as you've described, and that assumed extra duty that the Pullman took on
Yes.
of delivering the news wherever their route took them.
Mhm. Yeah. And it really follows something very, very controversial, but I think it was what was in Nikki Giovanni's mind. She's been getting a lot of flack for her not really liking the movie The Butler. She loved Oprah's performance in it, and she thought she should win an award for it. But she said the thought that a black butler would stand there and hear a president or any official talk about a plan to do harm, a plan that would do harm to African American people, and not say anything to anybody, not speak to a porter or anything. I think she's thinking about things like that, how information was shared, to really help. Great question.
Where'd you get the photos, Tim?
Well, first I looked in, I had a book and about the South Side of Chicago, and then I asked a student honestly, said, "Are you able to take a picture of it in your iPhone?" And he looked at me. I said, "Okay, let's try this. Why don't we look up the author on Google and the name of the picture?" And that's how we found them.
Great. No, they're revealing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yes. When you look at the back interest of some of them, there was front interest and back interest as well. In her writings, as I said, she exhibited both Black and European traditions, disarming white audiences. It said that she did focus on the larger Black audience white audience when she was writing, to kind of trouble the consciousness and provide an understanding of Chicago's African American poor class community. Using real characters, she began to tell their stories. Like many experiences, these stories have a way of telling many stories within it. So I'm going to go to the book. Now, how are we going to separate it? Now, Gwendolyn Brooks dealt with the isms. She dealt with racism. She dealt with classism. She dealt with sexism. When we talk about the core, the significance of the book, she dealt with abortion. She dealt with black hair. She Oh, warm in the waiting for joy, my dears, and it cannot be too long. Oh, pity the little poor chocolate lips that carry the bubble of song. Out came the saucily bold Willie Boone. It was woe for our Maddie now. He wore like a jewel a lemon-hued lynx with sand waves loving her brow. It was Maddie alone by the grammar school gates, yet chocolate compassions had she. Maddie on Maddie with hush in her heart, Maddie on Maddie to be. At issue, the brown, I call this the brown paper bag. Light skin, or when I was coming up, light skinned it. Long an issue in the African American community as in interrace prejudice or segregation, seen as more privileged, where light skin within the black community really took prominence in some HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. Recently, which is just last year, there was a piece in the Huffington Post that referred to the test, and it said propagated as urban legend, but a real practice for some of our most reputable HBCU campuses. Light complexion was once an admissions qualification for college enrollment and fraternity and sorority membership. Best candidates were as light as or lighter than the hue of a brown paper bag. Ruler or other inanimate object brought to life with the task of adjudicating ethnic acceptance. In this piece, Brooks addresses a black boy's abandonment of a dark-skinned schoolgirl for a girl with light skin. It confronts also within this, within her work, this piece particularly, I see the confrontation of the issue also of a woman's happiness, validation existed, being at the discretion of man, in this terms, a boy. It continues the downward spiral of intersectionality of the consequences of identity, from sexism to the existence of racism, having dark skin in a society that privileges whiteness. Brooks then continues her confrontation or education on issues of gender and racism, and takes it to the next level and confronts sex and desire, which is historically linked to a notion of narrative of black man's desire for white women. It is also addressed as a horror in American history, the lynching of African Americans, and that is the next one we will talk about. Before I move to the Ballad of Pearl May Lee, I want to stop there, because just like her poems, I dropped something heavy, and I want to see if there's any questions. Yes.
Is the whiteness issue as strong today as it was, say, in the 50s? My sense is it isn't.
Excuse me. In the 50s, I would say the consequences of being non-white in society was more overt and violent. As a person of color, I would say it exists today. Oftentimes when you talk to students, or even you deal with grown individuals, in my research I ask students, when did you find out that you were African American? That's one of the questions. I did 3 interviews, so I do the background interview and then some more. And many of them, I would say about 70%, stated when I got here, and here not meaning American University, I have students from Southern schools, Midwestern, and study. And that I began to ask questions, and I'm a qualitative researcher, which is difficult, because the voices are speaking to you, like, what are you saying? I said, but in the first interview, For one, you couldn't be a part of the study unless you identified as African American. That's the first question. So and then some students said, oh, I came from all black town. So I'm like, trying to connect this, I learned here, and I understood what they were saying is that they understood the consequences of being black within the space of a historically and predominantly white campus community. So to that question, the pause is complicated because it really, opens up and to the level of how much a person is willing to share that experience. But yes, talking to individuals, yes, I still today, black staff and faculty get together to kind of do the encouragement of, let's breathe, let's talk about what's occurring. And now, after the post-Obama time, most people don't really want to talk about it anymore because there's an African American in the White House.
I understand your point, but it doesn't address mine, which is within the spectrum of blackness.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is in the 50s, the social benefit of being a light black was far greater than it is today.
Yes, as they say, it's making a comeback though, but yes. Yes.
Speaking of Obama, I will tell you one story. My mother-in-law friends were unable to vote for Obama because he was black, though they wanted to vote for him.
Mm.
But when they found out he was Hawaiian, then they could vote for him.
Yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Great question. Okay, so we have the introduction, and then I'm going to read the Ballad of Pearl May Lee, just some pieces of it. It's a little bit longer. Again, in the book I have, I believe it's on 42. Then off they took you, off to jail, 100 hooting after, and you should have heard me at my house. I cut my lungs with my laughter. Laughter, laughter. I cut my lungs with my laughter. They dragged you into a dusty cell, and a rat was in the corner. And what was I doing? Laughing still, though never was a poor girl Lorna. Lorna, though never was a poor girl Lorna. So, in this ballad, she begins to, she talks about a situation where the male has now connected to a white woman. And the consequences of that is of being gathered. Now later it tells you in this ballad that at a point in time after the, I'm going to say action occurred, after the action occurred, that there was a statement in which the white woman, it is very interesting because in this poem she then calls to challenge the general grouping of African Americans. Now she's naming Pearlie Mae, but also is the guy is individual. In this, she is grouping, which I can imagine was troubling at the time. She's grouping white identity into one group. So, said you rape me, you rape me, so she softly said, you rape me, and what the hell? So what the hell? So, and he said, I'll tell you every white man in this town, I'll tell them all of my sorrow. You got my body tonight. And you got my body tonight. It says some other words that I don't want to say. I'll get your body tomorrow. And also, it goes back to, so we have these dark pieces and you're talking about lynching, and then she go back. And I was laughing down at my house, laughing fit to kill. You got what you wanted for dinner, but brother, you will pay the bill. again, from the historical perspective, and this narrative of the black male's desire, or putting at the desire of white female body, was really highlighted in the 15 film Birth of a Nation. How many have heard of that? So it's a movie that glorified the establishment of Ku Klux Klan and was called historically accurate by President Woodrow Wilson. And thinking about how I started off this talk, you know, I'm so glad that I did not go to Woodrow Wilson Elementary School, because there was one. Doing my senior thesis for my undergraduate in historical studies, my topic was the effects of the 1915 film Birth of a Nation on this period of American history. And after the film, lynching of black men more than doubled. So in the South from 1880 to 1940, there was a deep-seated hatred and fear built against African Americans, which led to white mobs turning to lynch law as a means of social control. One scholar first found in lynch law, he stated that lynching is a criminal practice which is particular to the United States. So here you have this challenge within society being brought to the front. She brings it. It is gritty. It is in the language. It is right out there. It's telling exactly a story as to what was going on during that time. But really bringing to light some different things. So it is there's this back and forth between I'm upset because of this desire, but that's what you wanted and that's what you got and you will pay for it. Almost to say, didn't your mama tell you something? Is this not something that you already knew? So that's one of the challenges in that. The poem is really, really, really gritty, and there are some things I marked out because there's a video, and somebody inevitably at my church will find the video, and I'm a minister, so so when I was reading it, I said I gotta be careful what I read, because that's the one day one of the young people in the church will be searching too, and like, do you know what Minister Tim said on the computer? So continuing in what I call a challenge of the tendency of American society to view current events in an ahistorical way, Gwendolyn Brooks introduced more voices that speak to the condition of black male identity within the space of America. With these vignettes, you also can see the emergence of a discourse around black male role within the African American community, which continues today. So let us start. So heavy, we're going to move to a little lighter things, although it may not be lighter. We'll see. On my book is page 6. So I'm giving some background, and I think I'm going to start going to school and asking questions before I start doing an explanation. When Mrs. Booker T. When Mrs. Booker T ruined Rosa Brown, Mrs. Martin Booker T ruined Rosa Brown, Mrs. Martin moved away to the low west side of town. Don't care if I never see that boy again to the end of my days. He wrung my heart like a chicken neck. He made me a disgrace. Don't come tell me he's dying. Don't come tell me he's dead. But tell me if he'd take that gal and get her decent wed. What are we talking about? As I talk about the challenge, and beginning to challenge, what is the role? What is Mrs. Martin upset about?
Sounds like a baby daddy situation.
It's a baby daddy situation. It's a baby daddy situation. It's interesting.
When was that poem written?
This is all in the 1945 book.
So what we don't know is the relationship between Mrs. Martin and Booker T.
As mother and son, that's the son.
Mrs. Martin is a hospital.
Mrs. Martin is her mother, and Booker T is her son.
But you've assumed that.
No.
Where does it
Oh.
say that?
The first line, Mrs.
When
Martin.
Mrs. Martin's Booker T.
Could be her husband.
Could be your husband, could be, I think the way you
Oh,
read it.
from, yes.
And who is
Yes.
this guy?
Yes, I've read the interpretation that it is son. It's the son.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So
She wouldn't want her
so,
husband
yeah.
to marry.
Yeah, she
No, no,
wouldn't want to. Yeah, so yeah. Yeah. So no, yeah. So it is. It is.
But
It
she had
is son.
to
Yes.
move away.
There's a reference to Booker T. Washington.
Yes.
Right.
Very.
Why was
interesting.
that?
Well, one of the accounts is what I'd say about this challenge of what is the role of the African American man in the community. As you know, he was a leader in the black community, but I believe one historian references and states that that he was a product of that, where it is or he married. Someone in his family is connected, married, and had a life of misery thereafter. So with Booker T, she was, because you marry for the sake because someone is pregnant and there is not love and there's misery. So she put a lot of things within that. But that's one of the things I read. I saw one account for that. Like what I try to do is when I see something, I try to back it up to make sure that this is what was happening.
But my response to it was when she named the kid Booker T, it was the expectation that this kid would become a leader, the sort of person that you would mentor. And then she's hurt as hell to find out that he's just a street boy.
Yeah. One of the things I see in this is it's a couple of things. So we first get the challenge of this whole notion of respectable woman. What is a respectable woman? And the reality that in her moving kind of signifies that when young girls were pregnant, they often had to leave somewhere. So she is taking on the character, Mrs. Martin appears to take on or take ownership of the shame that is prescribed to only Rosa Brown. And in that, she appears to be more angry at Booker T, is an anger at also society. That the root of that all of the focus is on the position of the woman in this situation. So it gives voice to the frustration of a mother's son. The frustration also, woman and man, with a painful, more sorrowful, and as I was reading it, I felt pain mainly because in the African American community, I often hear, and it's been portrayed in the last movie, Meet the Browns, at a point when the mother said, and I've heard this growing up, where a mother would say, "I've done all that I was supposed to do by you." The church comes in as the ownership of the mother to raise up a child, which is where the respectable woman comes from in the Old Testament, to raise up the child. And so the anger is, I have taught you better than this, than you to bring shame on what I have done for you. But also in the midst, it's this ballad of things going back and forth that, also this has brought shame to this woman. And the only way that you can fix it, the only way that I will speak to you and it will be fixed, is for marriage.
I'm a bit surprised to hear you relate mothering from the Old Testament, because I'm well familiar in the Old Testament that talks what is the role of the father and how he will bring the children up and what his responsibilities are. But I don't remember the part that talk about the role of the mother.
We used the term, see, and now we got a minister stuff on the Bible.
The only
The text that says her children rise up and call her honorable. We used it for my mother's birthday. So that's a piece, you know, in the church. The large population of the church is still, even during that time, women. So the honorable woman is seen as one that brings up the children in the way of the Lord.
I understand that, but I don't see it in the Old Testament. I mean, when I think of the Old Testament stories and the role of the mother, the one that comes to my mind was the wife of Isaac who put the cloth over the other son's hand so that he could get the blessing. That's one of the few images I have in the Old Testament of the mother doing something specific.
And I'm forgetting that passage.
Proverbs 31.
Proverbs 31.
Proverbs 31.
That's what it is, and that was my mother, the text we used. Can you read that?
Sorry, trying to find the actual. Okay. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Sorry, this is really just that verse, so I'm not getting like.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find more.
We often see, I don't think that we're used to seeing in literature anywhere in our society that anybody's blaming a male for this action, that's what strikes me about this, is that she's not blaming the girl, she's blaming her son, and I find that to be very striking and unusual.
And
Well, I think moms would always feel awful if another woman, the girl, was harmed. My son needs to do right by her. I think that's my, maybe I'm reading this as a mom.
No,
The
that's
sentiment
good,
coming out. That,
Some moms think she must have been a hussy.
Right, yeah,
Who seduced my innocent son.
yeah.
but it also goes to
I'm a mom of daughters.
it also goes to what he was saying, that we don't hear about Mr. Martin.
Yeah, right, you don't.
So is Mrs. Martin a former Rosa?
And we don't know.
We don't know. I am embarrassed that I can't remember what they call that woman. It's not honorable woman, but it's in Proverbs. It's going to come to my mind as we go through. Part of this, you know, she brings out this whole piece of the advocacy or fighting for women. Now, as I said, back to really the church plays a big part of this. One of the most also sentimental parts about doing this is when I was in the Chicago area, I attended the Apostolic Faith Church on 38th in Indiana, affectionately known as 38th Street, which is right behind or right in front, depending on where you stand, of Wendell Phillips High School, which is the high school that Gwendolyn Brooks graduated from. The church has been there since 1917. And also during in that area is also Indiana Avenue Pentecostal, which is right down the street, which we call 35th Street. Now, I would talk to longtime members. The pastor who is currently there, he's been there. I don't have him. I'll show him later. He's been there since he was born in the late 40s. But they used to have this piece that you would have to go up, and so a Rosa would face really difficult consequences at church, depending on what it was. But most of them, you had to go up and apologize for it. In the Apostolic Pentecostal Church, there was, if you did not come up, they had what they call Saints meetings. They would tell me about it, I just can't believe it. But the Friday Saints meeting, if you did not come, because someone, whether even a male saw, some of the members saw you, I don't know why they was around there, but saw you at different places, you had to come and you had to confess or you were disfellowshipped. And some churches actually had one of those plaque things that they put your name on to show when you walk in the door who's been disfellowshipped for that week for not coming forward. Yeah.
Were you confessing to the congregation or to a minister?
You were
public?
to the congregation. You was telling the congregation that you are sorry. When I was 8, that happened at the Baptist church I went to in East St. Louis, where a young lady got pregnant and she had to come in front of the church and beg the church's pardon.
What about the
What
young
was
man?
the follow-up?
The consequences were that you were not allowed to continue and participate as a full member of the church.
No, I mean, if she did confess.
Oh, if she did confess, she's all right to well, you can't do anything until the baby's born. You can't sing in the choir. All of that stops. You're done. You are sat down, and that was an active term, almost like an appointment or a deportment. You are sat down. And so for that period of time, after the birthing, you have a period of time where the pastor would then release you to participate again in the church. The church is a significant part of the community. In the social community too, which is often the debate. You hear pastors even now saying, "Are you here for God? Is this a social thing?" So, but it's still big part of the African American family. It was interesting when, and this is a side note, we'll get back to the porch, but when President Obama was talking about again. I was talking to some people and they said he said he didn't know what his pastor said. I said, politicians don't always tell the truth, but I think I could stand up for him on this. I remember my pastor talking about the picture show, and you shouldn't go to the picture show. And I was like, amen. My pastor, he's still living now in St. Louis. He's now well over 80, and he and his wife didn't even kiss until they were married. They didn't even hold hands. So. Old Pentecostal, and he would talk about the picture show. Now, all of you all know what the picture show is. Okay, all right. So, sometimes I tell young people you don't know the picture show, and he was talking about it. He said, you got to really watch the picture show. I'm like, that's right, Bishop, and I'm going right with him. And one of the young people said, Mr. Tim, don't we have like 2 of the church vans going to the Esquire Theater? I said, yes, we do. Be quiet. That's right, Bishop. So you continue to go. It's a part of you're a part of it. So that was a consequence. Next to Mrs. Booker T, I wonder, because there's a lot of things, and so she then goes and starts talking about this whole notion again of men in the society, which is what I see. So the soft man on page 7, she starts off, disgusting, isn't it? Dealing out the dams to every comber. Hits the heart like pain, and calling women Mary's chicken broads, men hip, and cats are corny to the jive, being seen everywhere, keeping alive, rum boogie and the joint is jumping Joe, brass rail, keyhole, Delisa, cabin in, and all other garbage cans. But grin, because there's a clean, unanxious place to which you creep on Sundays, and you cool in lovely sadness. No one giggles where you bathe your sweet vulgarity in prayer. Interesting about this poem, and I say that about everyone because it is interesting. At the beginning, she capitalized disgusting. Not just, I think, to scream it, but to emphasize it, because she says, disgusting, isn't it? So, isn't it is a step to convince, because maybe it's not. I'm going to have a connection later to Nancy's favorite poem about the front yard, backyard. But it's disgusting, so dramatically capitalizing the first word almost in order to place in the mind that it's disgusting, even if you don't believe it. Saying that you must agree. If you don't, you should. As as a black male in the community negotiating place, and she talks a lot about how within the space of this segregation of this class issue, how the struggle, where black men find their identity, and the soft man, parts of the soft man is later introduced in some of the things we call blaxploitation film. She uses slang in specific space to talk about the man who parties all week. So the soft man parties all week, seeming to have no direction, outside of having a good time, making no contributions to the community, yet being known in the community because he's everywhere. Remember, he's everywhere. And perhaps even idolized. Disgusting, isn't it? Idolized by some, yet he's in church on Sunday. Goes back to the question, what happens to them in church on Sunday, sitting alone in order to make up for the activity, if you're speaking in church terms, the sin. Within the black church community, there is a connection to the passage in the Bible, Revelation 3:16. So then because they are lukewarm, I call this the scare scripture. The scare scriptures, the mothers of the church, used to scare scripture. If you know anything about the black church, the mothers are serious. Serious. You don't cross the mothers of the church. You don't do that. But it talks about, so then because thou art lukewarm, you neither hot nor cold, I spew thee out of my mouth. And this was a big thing because they say, oh, you either for it or you against it, and God will just spit you out. So part of this is bringing up that notion of saint on Sunday, ain't on Monday, the challenging the part. And she continues to go forth in talking about whether something is disgusting and reputable. I call these what defines reputable, what defines not good within the society, within the role of black males and women within this society, within Bronzeville. Another pause. Questions? Yes.
The title, I don't quite get it. The shiftless man, the no good man, whatever, but the soft man.
Mm-hmm. When I thought about that, because when you read the title, it's like we're going somewhere different, and I was thinking that it was going to be something totally different than what it was. Mm-hmm. The thought also comes to that you're double-minded. You're not really making contributions. You're not owning up to what you're supposed to do and what your role should be as a man. So it's not, you're not making a significant contribution to the community as you see this man everywhere. What actually are you doing? You're everywhere. You're partying. But what are you actually doing? That's where I see that, then you're calling women chicks and broads, and why is that? So we question things today that pop culture do. Why are you doing that? How is that significant? How is that helping? How does that edify society? How does that increase society, or if any way? So that's where I saw the soft man, and that's how it related to me. As people say, you got to be a man. What does a man do? A man provides. A man has a family. Those things that in that time that they talked about. The one beautiful thing about this, about Gwendolyn Brooks, is I saw an interview of her where I read about it, and oftentimes people would interpret things within her writing. She would come and say, that's not what I was saying, but if that's what you got, that's okay. Because it's in the notion of telling the story of the individual to also tell the story of a experience of others was okay with her. Questions? More? Okay, although we have some more pictures of that. We've already mentioned the presence of the church and the structure of society and the culture of Bronzeville as more of a black background explanation. representation, Brooks also challenged the inaction of the church. So there's a reason I put Softman, talked about that, to move towards the inaction of the church. The presentation of heaven, so funeral, she talks about the funeral. This is just a funny advertisement. Protect your family from embarrassment. So,
And ours is a sympathetic story.
yeah. So, she talks about the presence of funerals as, more of, a performance in the funeral. She talk a little bit, to whatever you incline, your final choice here must be handling occasional sweet glitches. Occasional sweet cliches with the dishonesty of death tact. For those people are stricken, they may want none of your long-range messages. So, dealing with the funeral and dealing with the church, I want to, she talks about the funeral on page 8, but she says, the preacher and tradition of piety and propriety rise. The people wait for the dear blindfold. Heaven is good denied. Rich are the men who have died. There's a scene in the movie Color Purple. How many have seen Color Purple? This is one, okay. So let me take you to the field. Oprah Winfrey character Sophia confronts the Whoopi Goldberg character Celie. Do you remember that? And they're discussing Celie's tolerance of the domestic violence that she experiences from Mr. and how Celie thinks that Sophia should be tolerant. She's intolerant. And there's a statement that she says, Celie tells Sophia, this side will be over soon, heaven lasts always. Sophia's reply, you better bash Mr.'s head in and think about heaven later. Connected to this notion of suffering on earth and reward in heaven has been present, present comfort preached throughout, from slavery through the civil rights, and even today, the notion of reward in heaven and not helping to change the situation. Again, the church is everywhere in the community. So, this is a picture of a storefront church during that time. This church, this was Elder, I think her last name was Smith, but she was an elder, and she was the first woman to be, or first black to have a church built during that time from the ground, because everyone else would have a church that they bought a building and converted it, and she built one from the ground. And the book that talks about it is awful. It talks about that people are wrapped up in a primitive spirit, meaning I was like, okay, no, that's not how you describe it. But being the church being a center part, I mentioned Apostolic on 35th, 38th Street, and 63rd Street, where Gwendolyn Brooks lived. This notion of you must concentrate on heaven, and that somehow, as she stated in the poem, that the end of the life is the good part. That's Bishop Smith. He's still there now. One of the things he talked about all the time, how during that time, the members of the church did not want him to go to medical school. He's a pediatric oncologist, hematologist, and they were telling him, you shouldn't go. He's at Chicago's Children's Memorial and professor of medicine at Northwestern, and they were saying, you shouldn't go, that's not of God. And so this notion of God and God being praised, God first, there's no dichotomy between what you need to do in life to change. Brooks challenged that in her poems. You can see it in the Hunchback girl as well. As we see time, the Hunchback girl thinks of heaven. The identity of disability in society is brought up, in a society that privileges ability. You just imagine the difficulties of negotiating a disability in many of the spaces you've seen. where African Americans lived during that time. But the whole thing of looking for grace, looking for the solution in heaven, is really, really big here. What is also intriguing about the narratives is, again, going back to determining what is reputable and what is pleasant. I want to read Maud and try to get us out of here on time. Nancy, this was one of your favorites.
Is Maud
too.
and Sadie?
Yes. Maud went to college. Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scrapped life with a fine-tooth comb. She didn't leave a tangle in. Her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chicks in all the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name. Ma and Papa nearly died of shame. Everyone but Sadie nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girl struck out from home. Sadie had left a heritage of her fine-tooth comb. Maud went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She's living alone in this old house. Why did you like that one?
Well, it was kind of like which one had the better life.
Yeah. The thread, and I know it's not too much of a limb, but when I read it, I saw this thread of challenge of what is respectable and what is good within this experience. It's almost like Brooks was saying, I'm showing you the experience, but you know how you judge the experience is up for question. It's up for question that women have rights. She's really writing about women, that the choice of Maud versus Sadie. Maud is enjoying life. Others were pitying. Like, oh, you didn't go to college. You had 2 babies, and you're not married. And she's having a good time, enjoying life. Who's happy?
But it's the way that Brooks nails it so simply by saying she bore 2 babies under her maiden name. It was just that, and she just. For me, it's the way she's been taking language, is just putting 2 or 3 words together that makes it crystal clear. That's what confused me, because I didn't find it crystal clear in Mrs. Martin.
Yeah. She also does it with men in the next poem, the independent man. Now, who could take you off to a tiny life in 1 room or in 2 rooms or in 3? And cork you smartly like the flash of wine. You are not any woman, not a wife. You let her twirl you. You let her twirl you. Give her good glee, showing your leaping ruby to a friend. Through twirling would be meek. Through twirling will be meek, since not a cork could you allow for being made so free. A woman would be wise to think it well if once a week you only rang the bell. So again, she's introducing these. He's not married, living free, again, moving more into moving more into what's happening around here in the whole judgment of life. I want to read one last one of talking and seeing whatever you have.
Going
Yes.
back to Sadie and Maud, when they describe Maud as being a little brown mouse, are we picking up that lightness, that the lighter Negro will be going to more acceptable in going to college, the intellectual route, as opposed to the darker ones who's having the street life?
Well, because Sadie actually went to college, so it was just a way of describing. It was her description of her that she was brown, and not to say
White, brown, rather than black.
yeah, she was brown. Now, would you be, Nancy, would you be more intrigued to know, did you find out who the front yard was about?
Probably not.
Okay, where is my front yard? On 10. So we talked about, let's go read it. I stayed in the front yard all my life. I want to peek at the back. Where it's rough and unattended and hungry weeds grow, a girl gets sick of a rose. I want to go in the backyard now and maybe down the alley to where the charity children play. I want a good time today. They do some wonderful things. They have some wonderful fun. My mother sneers, but I say it's fine. How they don't have to go in at 8:45. My mother, she tells me that Johnny May will grow up to be a bad woman, that George will be taken to jail soon or late on account of last winter he stole our back gate. But I say it's fine, honest I do, and I like to be a bad woman too, and wear the brave stockings of night black lace, and strut down the street with paint on my face. Who's that?
Who is that? Is it her?
Yeah, yes, it's her. This is about her. Her mother, think about her mom. Her mom really, you know, she kept it together. It's when I read this and listened and read about an interview that other poem made, that's why I made that notion that she didn't suggest that she sent her work in. She told her mom was tight on her. Mom, because being black community, mom was tight on her. She wanted to go out and play. And mom said, no, you're not going to do that, because she was saying, you know, no. And so here she was, and I want to be, you know, a mod. I want to go out. I want to see how it is, Mom. And she said, no. And it resonated with me because that's how my mother was, where I grew up. You know, I was going to be in church, you know, and you went to church Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you know, choir, Bible class, everything. Other than that, I was at the band, at school. You were going to do something. You were going to be productive because you were going to college. So that was about her. On in the book, and I'll begin to stop, you know, she talks about other things. She deals with hair. Throughout her career, she deals with hair. So in that one about, let me get to the titles, because that will help me talk about it real quick. So she deals with at the hairdressers, and talk about this whole notion of of longer hair. The woman in the hairdresser, she wanted longer hair so she can compete, you know, with the other women, because it was seen as more beautiful, and she had short hair. Also, like I said, there's one in here where she deals with, you know, abortion as well, but it speaks about abortion. But when they asked her about it, she said, it was the one about mother they thought spoke about abortion. And she said, no, it's about the mother. It's about being the mother. Again, people will read things into it, and it's not necessarily what you said. But she did speak one directly about abortion. I don't know. Did anybody get a chance to read that one? Which was the mother. And then she does a series of poems where she deals with gay chaps at the bar, where she begins to talk about the treatment of African Americans after World War II, after they got back, and how lynching was still pervasive, and does it in a way that where not like some of her other things that she deals with it just directly, but kind of talks about it in a more story way, and with that one, and you know, like anything, I wish I had more time coming back. Sunday Satin Leg Smith, I know when Nancy get the book, she's going to read this. You got to check out the book. This one she does the third, in third person. She talks about the, what I call the Zoot Suit Man. He's in some rights called the Ghetto Prince. He is the one to see. His closet is filled with pretty clothes, and almost as a snoring back to the challenge. It's interesting how her audience was for the larger white community, but throughout it, she seemed to challenge others in the community. Like, man, you look good. You got all of that going on. What are you doing? How are you contributing? What difference are you making besides being a person of the night? What is your contribution to that? I am at past 8:30. There's some of the pictures with it, but I want to stop with one that was not within the book, but to kind of take you to her mind and thought. I want the last voice of official voice to be hers, and then we can eat, we can talk. I know we're beyond time, or I could give you my card and you could come back and sit in my office, and we can talk.
Thank you. I guess I'd better offer you We Real Cool. Most young people know me only by that one. I don't mean that I dislike it, but I would prefer it if the textbook compilers and the anthologists would assume that I've written a few other poems. I wrote it because I was passing by a pool hall in my community one afternoon during school time, and I saw therein a little bunch of boys, I say here in this poem 7, and they were shooting pool. But instead of asking myself, why aren't they in school? I asked myself, I wonder how they feel about themselves. And just perhaps they might have considered themselves contemptuous of the establishment, or at least they wanted to feel that they were contemptuous of the establishment, might want to thumb their noses at the establishment, and I represented the establishment with the month of June, which is a nice, gentle, non-controversial, enjoyable, pleasant, fragrant month that everybody loves. This poem has been banned here and there because of the word jazz, which some people have considered a sexual reference. That was not my intention, though I have no objection if it helps anybody. But I was thinking of music. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we learn light, we strike straight, we sing sin, we then gin, we jazz June, we die soon. I'm going to read you 3 more poems.
All right, thank you.
Guess I better offer you We Real Cool. Most of you know me only by that.
So for those of you who've become semi-regular at these book readings, every night is different. Every single time is different. We get a different experience because the book is brought to us through somebody who has read it deeply and richly and lets us see it through your eyes. Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
You can now walk in the closet.
Yes.